Hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. If you do like the programming you see here, the musicians and artists that I talk to and visit with, please be sure and hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel. Derik Timms is an English guitarist, vocalist, composer, producer, and sound engineer. Derik began his music career in the band Peanut Rubble in 1967. The band did record some material and play in support of bands such as The Pretty Things and Pink Floyd. However, a recording contract never materialized. In the early 70s, the band became Rubble, but split up shortly afterwards. Then Derik formed the band Twigg and had a stint in psych folk group Mother Nature prior to joining Brewer's Droop, the band known for featuring a pre-Dire Straits Mark Knopfler. Over the years, Mr. Timms has played alongside musicians like Morrison, George Harrison, and Dave Edmunds. More recently, Derik formed blues rock band Moondogs, which released a couple of albums in the new millennium. The latest album is Lunar Blues, credited to Buddy King and the Moondogs. And my guest also works as a composer for broadcast, TV, and radio. Well, welcome, Derik.
Hi, Greg. Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining me and taking time out to visit. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
The beginning of the beginning. Well, I was born in Chesham in Buckinghamshire in the early 50s, and nothing much happened in Chesham. It was like a big scar in the ground, and it was the edge of my universe. You know, I went to school in that place, and I lived in a road where there was a bass player called Ian Summerlin, and Ian. I'm still in contact with him. We formed Peanut Rubble Group when we were pretty young, I suppose, 15 or 16.
Okay.
My father ran a local electrical shop, so I was brought up with wires and people fixing things all the way around me. And he had a shop in the town. And he also had a PA system, which I used to go out and wire up on the four various events that were run.
Was your dad musical at all?
No.
Okay.
He liked black acts, but he didn't really know. I don't think he noticed they were all black, but that was it. He liked the ink spots and kind of stuff. But my parents were very much against my career in music.
Okay.
Because it wasn't seen as a career.
You're right. Yeah.
And I was kind of destined to. I think he wanted me to work in his shop.
Okay.
But I had a feeling there was something else out there, you know, that I wanted to see a bit more.
Right.
So I kind of, as I became a teenager, I was listening to music, which was a big part of everybody's life. There was no social media, you know. That was the up and coming thing was really the fashion and the bands that went. So I listened to a lot of pop music, anything that was in the charts. And as probably the other guys that you've interviewed have told you, there was nothing much on the radio back then. It was all BBC. Yeah. I think the guys in the BBC had to wear a bow tie on the radio, you know.
Nobody sees them.
Yeah, nobody sees them. It was so you get the picture of
what
was going on.
Well, when did Radio Luxembourg come along?
Oh, well, Radio Luxembourg have been there probably. I should think probably 50s. They used to. The address for them was 38 Hertford Street in London, and they would record things there. And then ship out the discs. They used to cut them onto acetates, were this big, and they would ship them out to the radio station in Luxembourg, and then transmit them back, because we weren't allowed to have any other. We couldn't have. There was no local transmission at all, apart from radio hams. Right. So we used to pick up Radio Luxembourg very badly. It would fade in and out. You might catch a tune, you might catch half a tune, but it was the thing, you know. It was.
Yes.
So, but it came from London, all the material. So a lot of the bands that we're perhaps going to talk about, I'm thinking of the Roulettes and Russ Ballard. They would go into Radio Luxembourg every week, and they would record a half-hour show and do the jingles as well.
Right.
Which sounds dead easy, but if you imagine that most bands probably played live had 30 tunes, then you quickly used up your 30 tunes in just a few programs. So they would then just play anything, or make something up on the spot just to kind of make the time up. So a lot of the back then, you've heard of needle time. You could only have so much needle time on the radio, and the rest had to be live.
Right.
So that kind of helped the bands. But my listening moved from Radio Luxembourg to the Pirates. The Pirates were moored offshore, and Buckinghamshire is right in the middle of the country. But there, I had a Hallicraft. If it's up on the wall there, you can't see it. A Hallicraft receiver, which was out of an aircraft, and with a long aerial on it, I could pick up all the radio stations and listen to them on headphones. So they would. That was it was great actually thinking about that, because there's Radio Caroline, Radio London, Radio City.
Right.
There were quite a few, not just boats, but there were some fixed stations out in the estuary, in the Thames estuary on old war platforms.
Mm-hmm.
But the BBC didn't like them. They should really have embraced the Pirates. But instead of doing that, they made that they couldn't be. They had to go 5 miles offshore.
Yes.
So that meant that extra 5 miles meant their transmitters didn't go as far, and they also had to get supplies from Holland, because they weren't allowed to be supplied by the English anymore. But on those stations played alternative music, because the DJs were well into what they did. They lived on the boat. In fact, I went to Radio Caroline only about 4 or 5 years ago. It's still there as a floating museum. It's out on the estuary.
It's still, wow. Yeah.
And you catch a boat and it takes you out there. You climb aboard, and you can see where the various studios are. And they've kept a couple of them analog studios with record decks. And you remember cartridge machines that you.
Oh yes.
And they said it was an interesting thing they said to me, because if you couldn't get supplied the records, you couldn't play the top 10. So if they didn't arrive in rough sea, you couldn't play the top 10.
You couldn't.
So what they used to do was there was a local FM transmitter for BBC.
Mm-hmm.
So they would record them off the BBC and put them into a cartridge, and then they got them for the week on cartridge.
They do that. The cartridge always reminded me of the 8-track.
It was like an 8-track.
Yeah. Did you guys have 8-tracks over there too?
Well, you might find one in a vintage car in a museum, but these were like 8-track size.
They were.
But it was only one loop of stereo, so you could make the tape up on a 2-track machine, cut it up, spice it into and then when it went around the jingle or the song, it had a piece of metal.
Yes.
Built into it, and it hit the metal, it would stop the cartridge and cue it up for next time. Yeah?
Yes. Hey, that's always interesting to hear the technical, explanations behind those, that technology as well. Yeah. When did John Peel come along?
Peel worked on the boats along with a lot of the disc jockeys that we had on Radio 1 here. Peel was always a little bit more alternative. We're talking about early 60s, I suppose, because he did go to the States.
Yeah, he did.
Back in 62 or 63.
Oklahoma. He was in Oklahoma. I know that.
Yeah.
Playing there. John Ravenscroft. Yeah.
Ravenscroft spoke with a Liverpudlian accent.
And that's what we loved about him. After the Beatles, we loved anything from Liverpool.
Yeah. So, really, later on, I owned a few studios. And if I had a band in that played really alternative stuff, they say, "What do you think? Are we going to have a big hit?" And I'd always say, "I think Peel will play it."
Right.
Just peel wood, he'd play anything that
He
was,
played anything. He would play whole sides of albums and things like that. Yeah.
yeah.
He
So
did.
for a long time, he was the guy. There was nobody else quite like him, and he really championed a lot of artists.
You took the words right out of my mouth. He really did. He gave so many their start. Yes. Well, back to you.
Yeah.
What was the first musical instrument you learned to play?
Well, I just wanted a guitar. One Christmas, I wanted a guitar or nothing.
Okay.
So, but I had a plastic thing apparently and broke all the strings on it when I was like 5. So I owned a guitar, early 60s, and I sat there and made it work. I had the bleeding fingers from trying to play stuff. Yeah. So the first tune I would have played all the way through was House the Rising Sun. And that was difficult because it's in 6, it doesn't fit the guitar very well. It's got this sort of, skip you have to do when you hit some of the strings. If there's an acoustic, I'll show you. Let me see. Yeah, there's one back here.
Let's see. Yeah, if that will.
Right. Okay, well, this is very similar.
Okay.
This one is very similar to.
Try that. Oh, a Gretsch. Yeah.
It's a Gretsch, and I use this for tracking on guitar because it's not the it's not the nicest of.
And I just want to clarify. I recognized it was a Gretsch. I didn't see the name through the hole in it. I didn't. Right. Okay.
These are very good for recording. They're not, it's not like a Martin.
Okay.
It's not a Martin. So it goes. I've got no pick, but. Yeah. Well, because it's skipping, a line's going.
Yeah.
Well, that's easy. Then it goes, and then you've only got 4 strings to go. You have to go.
Yes, there's that hesitation.
I mean, it's got this awkwardness to it, which is played beautifully on the record. I think they did it in a couple of takes. That whole thing. So that took a long time, and I didn't know it was in 6/8 either. Okay. So it wasn't. I should have been just strumming.
Okay.
Finding something to strum, but I forced myself to learn to do that, and then everything else seemed a bit easier.
After you went through that process.
But the things I'm listening to are pop music of the day, and some friends of mine were really into old blues.
Okay.
And the more raw it was, the more we pretended we liked it.
All right.
But I've listened to enough of it, so I did actually like it in the end. Okay.
Some of that Mississippi Delta, that Chicago blues. Okay. Right. Some of that dirty blues. Yeah.
John Lee Hooker kind of things,
as they say.
And we knew that the bands like the Stones were copying R&B, as we called it. We didn't know it was Chicago blues or where it was coming from. So we heard the Stones do it first. Well, of course, their take on it was nothing like the records I was listening to, Robert Johnson, and they were a million miles away and didn't really even connect the two. They were so different.
Yes.
But it generated an interest until the Stones started to write their own stuff. Because I think they realized when the Beatles wrote I wanna be your lover, baby. I wanna be your man. Until they did that, I think they saw that was where the money was. If you had to write your own stuff. So those Stones continued to do the bluesy things. They were really went crazy, and they were writing things that Mick Jagger acted his way through, like My Sweet Lady Jane and I See the Red, Paint It Black.
Paint It Black.
They weren't the blues anymore. This was something else.
No.
But played with that kind of gusto. So the machinery to record it on was still pretty basic. They recorded a Decca, which is so when I was probably 12 or so, I hear. So years later, I'm working with Gus Dudgeon, who told me the story, and I also mixed the Zombies for a time. So I was asking Rod about the recording that. I think you got some of that from Chris White.
Yeah.
But their cousin was a guy called Jim Rodford.
Jim Rodford, right?
And Jim was signed he was the guarantor for the electric piano for Rod. We had to have a guarantor to do hire purchase. So Rob was able to move from acoustic piano to electric piano. Then he got a bit of bass and he could direct the band in as to what to play. So they got this gig down at Decca, and the song they're going to record is that song. She's Not There.
Yes.
Well, back in those days, the engineers liked a liquid lunch.
Right. I think a lot of people today still enjoy that too.
I'm not sure if they do, but I mean, it was really something that was kind of normal.
Right.
But the story Gus told me was that he was the tape op at Decca. Okay. Decca's only sort of 40 miles from here.
Right.
And so that day they said, Gus, you're on. He's a bit worse for wear, so you're the engineer.
Oh.
So the very first thing he recorded was that song.
All right.
And it still gives me shivers. I've heard it thousands of times.
Yes.
It's got something built into it, like all the good records have.
It does.
It's got something built into it. So I asked him really how I was listening to it on CD. This is some years ago because Gus died back in the 2000s, early 2000s. I said, why did it sound so crisp? Because it had this little hi-hat figure on it. And what they used to do was you record on the 4 tracks, and then when you reduced the 4 tracks to stereo to make the master mix, you were able to add things on the mixdown. But of course, those things then don't exist on the master tape. So anybody going back to the master tape, it was done live at the time. So the little hi-hat figure that you hear, it's so crisp, was a first generation hi-hat played. So he told me this, and that meant that was his gig. Then he got the job as engineer. He made the company some money, and he went on to do things like the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, and he also did the John Mayall the Beano album. Which has got Eric Clapton's first sort of great guitar playing on, and quite diverse because as an engineer for Decca, you might find that you're recording or editing classical music one day and doing a band the next.
Right. Well, I wanted to mention you mentioned Bonzo Dog Doodah Band. You would work later on with Legs Larry Smith.
I did, yeah.
So we'll get to that. I wanted to show you this. I don't know if I got this many years ago. This vinyl, double vinyl. It's called Hard Up Heroes. I don't know if you ever remember. On Decca, it's all the Decca artists.
Oh yeah. Terrible drawings. But
yeah, they are. It is. They're all playing guitar, and some of them didn't play guitar. The ones that don't have a guitar in their hand, like Joe Cocker. There's no guitar.
Cool.
There's no guitar.
Is that Alexis Corner there?
Yes, Alexis Corner.
I played with Alexis. Yeah.
And the Zombies were on here. Tell Her No is on here. John Mayall, Honey Bus, the Birds, the BIRDS.
Yeah.
Ron Wood, the Poets. Yeah. All of these bands.
Is that a track called Leaving Here?
You know what? It sure is. Yes, it is.
Right.
Yes. Time Box, them.
Oh, Time Box. That was Mike Pato.
Yes, it was.
Mike, they had an incredible band. They were. I knew those guys as well.
Little Stevie Marriott. Yeah, they're all on here. Yeah. So that was
well, that's kind of a bargain bin album you got there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, double album I picked up at a store many years ago. Yeah.
There was this thing where you could put out a compilation like that, and you didn't have to pay.
Yes,
you didn't have to pay the artist because you in your recording contract said you can put them on a compilation. But because of that, I got to hear things like Spooky Tooth, and it was Mike used to live a few miles from here. I used to live over in Tring. Mike, the singer. So yeah, it all fans out. So where was I? I was talking about the Pirates, and got well into pop music. Mostly the record companies that couldn't get play on the BBC could send a check to Radio Caroline, and they would play it. They put it on what they called the power play. Not all the records were great, but it did mean that some of the things like that kind of stuff.
Yes.
We'd suddenly hear that, whereas we wouldn't have heard that on BBC. That was down to the Pirates, and they were quite personal. Back to the Pirates for a minute, because they were a big part of my life, or as a teenager. They do things like they could see the shore from where they were, so you could hear them talking to they knew there were cars, courting couples up on the cliffs. So they go through the alphabet and flash your lights when we get to. They work out their name by flashing the light, which was kind of weird entertainment, but I sort of enjoyed. It was nobody else was doing anything like that.
You had to create your own entertainment,
but then on top of the pops, I'm pretty young. I see.
Oh yeah. Hey.
I see Jimmy, and it's all over them.
Yeah.
That's what I was heading for, because there was something in his performance that was fun. He was a great looking character. He played amazingly. I put on a track the other night. It was the beginning of Little Wing, and I played the intro to it, and I just stopped and laughed because it's just so beautifully played. You spend a lifetime trying to unravel that. How good he was.
Right.
But
I still think his "All Along the Watchtower" is the best rendition of that song. Yeah.
Oh, that's what Bob Dylan says, isn't it? That's Bob was kind of annoyed because he just couldn't get here.
Yeah.
But what you've just shown me on that album was it's quite bizarre, the mixture of acts that they were put together by somebody that had not a clue that whether those things fitted or not. You go from one track to the next, they don't kind of match. They don't.
No.
So, and that still, I think, happens with executives that don't like music. They're looking at sales charts and they will put things together. They'll confuse a big band with a blues band.
Right.
Anyway,
they do. Yeah. Well,
so
go ahead.
So it's the Jimmy thing. It's I think there was a little bit on the end of Stone Free. There's about 5 seconds of something very psychedelic, and I would play that little outro over and over and over because it just had something in it. So I was enthused by the music. I still am, but we were starting to listen to things that were well played, whereas previous to that it was all a bit Moon in June. That side of it in English charts was always mixed up with vaudeville, so you get a serious piece of rock and roll mixed up with tears for souvenirs now that you've left me kind of stuff as well.
Well, what I wanted to say, what I found fascinating is in the early 60s, maybe before that, the UK musicians, were into our R&B, and blues. That influenced bands over there. You turned it into something special and then sold it back to us, And what one of the musicians I talked to recently, he said, and forced us to listen to our own music again, So it was kind of that process.
Yeah, well, Stones put on Howlin' Wolf on their show. I don't think he was. If you were the other side of the tracks, you wouldn't even know.
Right.
I read something that said, "Howlin' Wolf, what's that? A and then swore. Dog act.
Yeah, musicians that we would have never listened to, gone back and listened to, if it wasn't for the bands across the pond, in your country, turning it into something more pop oriented.
So in my hometown in Chesham, we had a dance hall called the Co-op Hall.
Yeah,
and it was on the circuit, so the bands would come through there. So every Saturday, I could walk a mile and go and see. I saw the Easy Beats, and then bands you never heard of, like the Flies, the Jeff Beck Group with Rod Stewart, and on the bill with that was a band called Skinny Cat. You familiar with Skinny Cat?
No, I'm not.
So that would be the first time I saw. What's the band John Gordon played with, the guitar player?
Yes, John Gordon.
Bernie Marsden.
Oh, okay, Bernie Marsden.
Bernie Marsden was in the support act. He was in Skinny Cat.
Okay.
And so we both could stand and watch Jeff Beck. And I think I thought he was going to be really loud, because he was sort of a Marshall guy it was a high volume sort of thing, but they weren't. They were just great playing, not noisy at all. It was fantastic. And they were playing the Truth album.
Oh, the Truth album.
So that's the time. And then, of course, Led Zeppelin stole the whole of the Truth album and made it into something else. But I was playing the Truth album because I've got the vinyl. We've got another room which I use for transfers, and that's got in it all the different mediums, like vinyl and mini disc, DAT. I can transfer cassettes. So I put on the Truth album, and of course the first track on there is Greensleeves. Well, Led Zeppelin weren't going to do instrumentals, and Jeff always had an idea, an ear rather, for melody. He would always play great, in all his songs he went for the melody. That was his thing. So going through the Co-op Hall in Chesham were all sorts of bands on a regular basis, including Status Quo, who was an English sort of band that never made it in States.
Yeah, that dual guitar. Yeah, they them, and then later on, Wishbone Ash is another one I enjoyed.
Yeah. Well, I knew, because now you're talking very local, because Andy Powell was from over the hills. And with Ian and I in the Peanut Rubble, we would be playing the youth clubs about 8 miles away. So there was Gaybridge and Warner's End. And amongst those players was Andy Powell, and also guys like Mickey Groom. Fantastic ears. And they were the big boys, we'd go to watch them to sort of learn how to do it. And they were fantastic players, they'd have a vibe to them. Like, you occasionally come across that these days with a new band that has its audiences that must go and see them. So when they packed up, I bought this guitar. I'm going to show you now. This was from the guy in the Black Tulip, in the band called Black Tulip, Tom Atkin. And I needed a proper guitar, because till then they were homemade ones. I'd cut myself out a Telecaster shape that you'll see if you look on the Peanut Rubble album. Cut it out of a piece of mahogany, stuck a bit of kitchen top on it, and one pickup, because that's all I could afford. And that was my guitar until this.
Until that one. Oh,
so this is a Gibson 330,
yes,
which is a lovely guitar,
yes.
But it's not a rock guitar. It's kind of a jazz thing.
Jazzy, I was going to say, yes.
And on the back, it's got I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, yes.
Some stuff on
there. Yes.
Put on by a guy called John Dunsterville.
Some artwork on there, yes.
It's under the finish. John Dunsterville was in a band called Rainbow Folly.
Rainbow Folly, yes. Now I'm familiar with that band. Yes.
So spelled with 2 F's. So this is what they used, and we were talking about Radio Luxembourg, and so I went into Radio Luxembourg one day, And the guy that worked there was Andrew Sterling. And I went to school with Andrew. And he got himself a job at Ray Luxembourg as the engineer. And we used some downtime by me saying, we've written these great songs. Would you like to hear them? And they said, yeah, sure, come in, book some time with Andrew. So we went in there one night. I borrowed the firm's van. I was a cameraman for a TV company by then, and borrowed the firm's van, left it on the Yellow Line up behind the Hilton Hotel in London. And we went into Hertford Street and we spent one night and we recorded some demos, which they then gave us on acetate.
Okay, right.
They didn't have tapes out, just acetates. So but this was the guitar I used, and I had a 100-watt amp built by Tony Merrill, who was the local amplifier builder, who built the loudest amps ever. You know, the brand was eventually called Elgin.
Okay.
So armed with that, I went in and I played sort of, which is the beginning of the Peanut Rubble track. We knew how to play the backing track, but we hadn't got as far as any vocals for it. So we played the track through, and halfway through the session, Andrew decided, in his wisdom, to get out a tape of a band that played tight to demonstrate what we should be sounding like.
Okay.
Because this is the first time we recorded it. But I'm not sure that helped us much. But when it came to, so we did the backing tracks, and then it came to putting on the vocal. And so the vocal you hear on that early single is just made up on the spot.
Is it? Okay.
They're completely meaningless.
You were ad-libbing. Huh?
I was ad-libbing, which is I still do. You know, I still do. We were doing the sound check a couple of weeks ago with the band. We were playing a new song, and I'm dyslexic, so if I am under any kind of stress, I can't see the lyrics. They don't make any sense. You know, they're there. If I'm cool, yeah, I can read every word. So after we played it down, you know, the guy said, "Oh, it seemed to go okay." And I said, "Did you notice anything about the lyrics?" And, no. So well, you just had 3 new verses. I made them up as we went along.
Yes. So you're speaking of Just a Dream.
Just a Dream.
B-side, yeah. Broken.
Right. Yeah, there's a guy. I found this the other week. He's just kind of weird. It wouldn't be for somebody well known, but he was showing you how to play that riff on a short on YouTube. That very riff.
That riff.
But so we would come up with those things. We were interested in Free because they were sort of local. They played at the Nag's Head over in High Wycombe, and we were interested in riffs. We tried to put our youth club band together with a singer, but they never worked out. They didn't turn up on time, or they didn't bother learning lyrics at all. So I ended up singing. So we had a 3-piece.
Okay. And
we'd be playing at local hops, you know, sort of. My first gigs were one of the early ones was the one you mentioned at Sale College. That's where I went to college. And that's where we backed the Lexus, and what was it you said? What's one on the poster? The Pretty Things.
Pretty Things.
You were on the Pretty Things. So that was kind of a bigger gig, but most of the things we played were parties, and we were learning the ropes, sort of how to entertain, how to put it all together.
We'll talk about playing with Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd Sid wasn't turning up for gigs at the time.
Okay.
So it was Gilmore on the guitar. I just remember they had what seemed like a lot of equipment, and there'd be echo chambers, Binson echo chambers. They were kind of expensive things, and they'd have like maybe 2 of them in series stacked together. So I think I was a bit overcome by thinking that their music was because they had the gear.
Oh,
this is what drives the sale of magazines, that you're going to sound like somebody because you've got the right stuff, right gear.
yeah.
But the Floyd were pretty dreamy, and you couldn't have told who was doing what because the lighting didn't display their faces at all.
Right. I was going to say they had their infamous light show going.
Yeah, you wouldn't recognize these guys in the street. They weren't selling personalities.
Yeah.
And it's such a long time ago that that's my image of walking backstage and thinking, crikey, this is a lot of stuff. We just got up there with a guitar and the lead, and they got vans and things. We were all to get vans. You see, I was at my school. I could one day through the science room window, I saw a band show up. And years later, I asked Ashley Holt, whose band it was, what they were doing there. And he said they turned up to see the headmaster to get him to sign their passports. But just that glimpse of these guys in their van, doing something outside of school. They'd left school. Ashley went on to be the singer with Rick Wakeman.
Okay.
But before that, they had a band called Warhorse.
Warhorse, yes, I'm familiar with that band as well.
And before that, he was in a band was Let's Go Surfing with the Reasons, which was obviously they did 4-part harmony stuff, and they were up and down the country doing that. Yeah. So he was my introduction. He was the first professional that I came across, because we were thirsting after knowledge, and the only way you could get that was really from Rick Desmond's Beat Instrumental that came out monthly. And any information, I learned to play all the chords, by watching a program you've heard about called Ready Steady Go.
You're right.
Ready Steady Go was on a Friday night, and if I was lucky, I'd sit in front of the screen, and you see the chord, you see it flash by, and I'd look down on the guitar and try and and the chilling as the midst of uncertainty, I want to be. You can pick out the chords. That's how I learned. There was no YouTube, and I didn't really know about arrangements. But I did have an art master at school that would. He set up the still life in the circle. He said, "Right, everybody's going to draw."
I have to say that I've always liked Donovan better than Dylan. I've always liked. He had. I mean, his voice to me is many times better than Dylan. I could never get around Dylan's, his voice. I mean, I think his songs are better done, performed, in the case of Jimmy, by other artists. I just couldn't get used to his voice, but I think Donovan, he just had everything,
I suppose if you have to use what you've got. With Dylan, he had developed a character voice that was really an old-time folk voice. And I think he realized quite early on that he couldn't continue aping his contemporaries. So he kind of, I think what is clever, if you watch, there's a film on YouTube about the Traveling Wilburys.
Okay.
And then getting together in the producer's kitchen, and they're all just strumming away. And there's one little section where it's, Bob, we need some lyrics for this. And he goes out and he gets the typewriter out, and he comes back and he sings it straight. And that's what you hear on the record. He's written. So I have a feeling he was a first take merchant.
Oh, yeah.
So he wouldn't perfect something. He would just go there, what's recording all about? It's not about going over and over it, getting it perfect. Yeah. You just have what I've got, and that's the take. So I'm pretty sure that that's how he approached records. And it's a bit, you know what Marmite is, do you have Marmite? Marmite.
What is that?
Marmite.
Marmite. What is that?
It's you either love it or you hate it. That's what it's a food,
Oh, I don't think I've ever tried that. If I did, I didn't know it was Marmite.
It's bitter stuff. It looks like axle grease.
Oh, okay.
You put it on bread.
Oh, really? Is it similar? Is it similar to like licorice? Is it?
it's a bit more Vegemite-ish, I suppose.
Oh, okay. Spread. It's a spread.
Bitter tasting. It's made from yeast extract. So you either like not Bovril, you either like Marmite or you hate it.
Okay.
And that's what I think. That's the way Dylan
to describe. Yeah. Well, yes. I think he and Jeff Lynne are the only surviving members of Traveling Wilburys, I think.
That's true, but it's just the immediacy of Dylan is probably not understood. You know, somebody that will go in the studio, play a song down. Van Morrison was the same. Play a song down, that's it. Did it work out? You know, they're going with 100 songs and you end up with 10 of them as an album. The rest of them, they'll try again another time or get rid of them, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, Van Morrison didn't have that nasally voice, though. So I just never
it is pretty stylized, though. Yeah. You know, he's Irish, so he sounds a little bit American.
Yeah.
And he does act, as they all do. You know, when you're singing, you're actually acting. So just we don't knock Mick Jagger for acting and sounding like trying to sound like a Southern guy one moment, Southern my sweet Lady Jane the next. We don't let that bother us. So, you know, with Dylan, you got to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's probably written more.
As the phrase is going around these days, as around our president, we'll grade Dylan on a curve. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
We're not going to get political here.
Right. We're not going to. Well, yeah. Broken Man, the B-side to that single, was included on a various artist compilation on Wooden Hill. Were you aware of that?
Well, the guy from Wooden Hill calls you up and he says, you know, I'd like him. He's just strokes you, and you know, I've got this. We'd really like to put it out, and it's fantastic. But overall, it's just a ploy to get the recording off you free. He doesn't want to pay.
He doesn't want to pay.
So some of those artists that you see on there, they've all given their recordings, and then of course he's selling them. He says it's not me that sells them; he distributes them to other people. So, you know, you make that of what you will. But so Wooden Hill is a little bit of a strange one. And I got a call from another record company saying, we'd like to put you out on a compilation. I said, yeah, okay. So how many other artists are there? Oh, there are just 60. So, and how many tracks are you going to put on? Oh, just the one. So you're going to have one track on a compilation of 60. And so I said, just a minute, I'll get the royalty out, because we get composition royalties and mechanical rights. And I looked at it and I said, oh yeah, well, the last time we put out the Rubble stuff, I earned £8.63. That's English money. So I think I'll pass on this one. So it was like I had the first time.
Yeah, you don't make money off of those. Would that happen to have been Cherry Red?
That was Cherry Red, yeah.
Okay. None other than
and there's some other stuff like Cherry Red. I noticed they'd used a video I'd shot on a Howard Jones, a very expensive set of Howard Jones music, and I called them up and I said, "You don't actually have the rights for that." And the next day, a guy called up and he said, bearing in mind they sold the lot, and these were £96 for the box set.
Right.
And he called up and he said, "Oh, I'm instructed to give you a call to. We want to sort this out with you, and so our offer is £200."
Okay.
There was like 20 minutes of video.
Yes.
So I just ceased the conversation. I won't be drawn into that. So they effectively they could have that. You know?
Yeah. Well. Speaking of Rubble and the name of your band, this is one that I picked up. Now that's a box set. And it's called the Rubble Collection.
That's a band, I think, isn't it?
No, this is one of that you were just like referring to, like with the 60 tracks.
No, you got it. You bought it.
Yeah, I did. Now, see, thank goodness that a lot of bands did.
I've never seen that.
did okay using their tracks on these, because that's how I found out about a lot of obscured bands, was from
Yeah.
compilations like that. This is a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 CD collection.
Wow.
And it's got lots of obscured, well, not obscured to me now, but over
Yeah.
the years, were. So
Well,
yeah, that's how, so that's
right.
how I find out about is these
So,
various.
so are we on that? Are we
You
actually?
know, now see, I don't know if you're on this one, but I just, correlating the name, I thought the
Yeah.
Rubble, and then the Rubble, I had to show this, but I mean, some of these I could just mention, and you probably know, Wimpelwinch, um, the Misunderstood,
Oh yeah.
Unit 4+2,
Yeah.
Mindbenders. Uh,
So what's the unit? What's the Unit 4+2 track?
it's I Will.
Right.
Pretty Things that you opened for, Defecting Gray,
Yeah.
Keith West, Shotgun Express,
Yeah.
Spencer Davis, a bigger
Yeah.
band. Yeah, all Tomorrow.
Yeah. Keith West. Yeah. Keith
Yeah,
West tomorrow.
that's
That's
it.
with the guitar player.
Yeah, the
Is My White Bicycle on there? Is that My
yeah.
White Bicycle?
Tomorrow is Revolution.
Right.
Kaleidoscope. Now, I talked to Peter Daltrey from Kaleidoscope. Yeah, there are just a bunch on here. Glass Menagerie, Orange Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're
I know them all. I know them all. No,
Yeah.
I can categorically say that none of those artists are driving around in expensive cars.
Right. Well, that was just how I picked up on a lot of these bands through those. So I tip my hat to Cherry Red because they do put out some nice compilations. Now how long?
They're very effective at doing that. Yeah.
At doing that too. Well, how long was Peanut Rubble together? How long were you guys together?
Well, we played probably from when we were 16 to probably over 4 or 5 years, I suppose. Maybe a little bit longer.
Okay.
We did. I tell you a story about how I left my job as a TV cameraman, which is I turned over the firm's van one morning at 6 in the morning.
Oh,
I hit some black ice. Unfortunately, there was nothing in the van. I'd unloaded it for a gig we were doing in London the night before, but a camera flew out the back and hit me on the back of the head as it went over. It was a Volkswagen. It went over and over. So during that week, I got concussion, and I was still living at home. And I just said, I've got to stop doing this. We're racing around everywhere. And if I'm going to, my words were, if I'm going to die, I'd like to die in a rock and roll band. So,
and it almost came true. Right?
My mum sort of looked at me a bit old-fashioned.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a drummer join us called Alan Hubbard, and Alan said, well, we're going to need to rehearse. The key to all this is rehearsal, So my mother will wake me up at 7 in the morning still, even though I insisted I was a professional musician.
Get out of bed.
So by 9 o'clock, we would be 10 miles away in a village, in a cricket club, set up all the gear, haul it in, and we would start rehearsing. Well, I was kind of worried by this because after a couple of weeks, I knew we couldn't afford it, on a daily basis. And it turned out that Alan just happened to know where they kept the key.
Oh, did he? Okay.
But by the end of the 2 weeks, we'd invited the agents down, the local agents, to come and see us, and we changed I don't know why we did it. We changed the white bulb for a red one, we got them in there, made a bit of a vibe. And so we started to do gigs. But some of those were great because they liked what we did. But the majority of them, they wanted to hear the hits of the day. They didn't want to hear a band playing original material. Yeah. And that was really what stopped us because our hearts weren't in playing Paranoid and those kind of things that we were expected to play. Yeah. And we'd go down to Plymouth. And I think I've got the records here somewhere because I'm a bit of a hoarder. I think we would probably have earned 30 or 40 pounds for a trip to Plymouth, which is good sort of 3.5 hour drive and back again, maybe 4 hours. And if we got off stage pronto before the last band, we could drive back and be back home by 5 a.m, which wasn't an unusual story, but it turned it into quite a hard life. But that was to become the norm with playing in most bands, that if you were going to go away for 10 days, you could afford a bed and breakfast. But the general thing is we started with Rubble, we started off playing in the north, and we were doing the working men's clubs. So the digs we got, until we realized they were theatrical digs, they chuck you out at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, wow.
So okay. 8 o'clock in the morning, you would be out on the streets in the north of England, where it was freezing, seaside towns in the winter. There's a delight about them, but it's still a bit kind of depressing. And we used to do around, we got there for 10 days at a time. I'm just trying to think where we were playing. We'd be playing north of Newcastle. And there were thousands and thousands of working men's clubs, and they ranged from theatres that some of the factories had, right down to mission huts. And on a Sunday, we'd see the miners come in with the black faces, and then they say, "Oh, could you back the act?" And you go, "Oh yeah, sure." And then the girl in the dressing room would take all her clothes off and dress herself back up again. We'd be back in the stripper.
Oh, that's what it was. Oh.
Or the strippers.
Yes.
So because there was the cab would be waiting outside, they do their thing, dress back up again in front of us, into their street clothes, and go and get in the cab and go and do another club.
Yeah.
So that was the apprenticeship, and after a bit of that, you're absolutely worn out. The money's not coming in. You're not doing something you enjoy doing. So I think I then pandered, and by the time we got Twigg together, it was another 3-piece, and Roger, the bass player, went on to play with Rick Wakeman.
Okay.
So he was the memory man with Rick, and we started to do better gigs with a better agent, and we would be on a circuit that originally Status Quo were on. So we turned up at Barbarella's for a week at Barbarella's in Birmingham. And the first thing they said was, "Then you're not going to be like that Status Quo, are you?" And we said, "Well, what do you mean?" They said, "Well, they wouldn't play the hits. They'd only play boogie." So we paid them off, So you've got this, is some nights you've got on your contract, you got cash on the night, and they'd insist it was check some places.
Oh, did they?
So you then have to put on your tough face and go through the bouncers, and get to the office.
Yeah.
And they would insist that it wasn't any. If you got your contract with you could say, "No, it's cash," and they say it's a misprint. So you'd have to fight for your money.
They made it difficult on you, yeah.
Very difficult, because if you couldn't get your money, you probably didn't have enough to pay for your digs that night.
Yeah, yeah.
And another trick was to pay you off. That only happened once. Club owner his wife doesn't like you, so we're paying you off. Yes. So you get one set out of you.
Yes.
And that was with Peanut Rubble, I think. No, that was with Twigg. So, but we were playing American basses.
That was another thing I was going to. Yeah.
Just like in the Spinal Tap routine,
Yes.
The American basses. But of course, that gave us a taste of America, because you had to change your money from pounds into dollars, and then you bought Cokes, and the basses were very well equipped, still are. Got banks on them and McDonald's and what have you. And these were secret military bases, and we go in there and entertain the people. And if there was a red alert, you'd stop playing. You could see the DEFCON lights going up, but if it went up high, they said, "Right, that's it." And then the planes would be taking off to see the MiGs off that used to come over the country, and it was their job to go and see them off. That's visibly get rid of the Russian planes. So that was quite varied. Army bases, and but then the stuff hadn't been going too well. I got a job in a music shop, and that meant I would come in the music shop sort of a bit late in the morning because I'd be until 4 or 5.
Oh yeah, playing late, yes.
So the boss, there was a guy called Percy Pryor over in High Wycombe. I thought I was being fired one day, and he said, Derik, I'd like to come into the office. I've done this, and he turned this piece of paper around, and it was my contract that then said I could start at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Oh,
so he changed it around. But it wasn't until a couple of years ago that my friend Bob Pierce, who was a drummer and worked in the shop, said, you know why he did that? It was because we doubled the turnover of the shop. See, I'd come out of working in my father's shop when I was a kid, so I knew about sales.
Yeah.
And we were very enthusiastic about guitars and drums and amps, and we were doing more business.
Yeah.
So that was the real reason behind it.
That was the real. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. You didn't realize that you had been doing that, inadvertently. Yeah. Yes. Helping him out.
Wow. So by playing country and western music with Frank Jennings and the Syndicate, I became a bass player. They were short of a bass player one night. I took one off the shop wall, took a Fender Precision, signed myself out. We used to have approval. So Fender bass on approval for 10 days. And I took the bass and I did the gig. And then they said, well, we need a bass player. So I became a bass player. And then the Brewers Droop thing came along. And I had to leave the music shop because they worked 7 nights a week.
Yeah.
Up and down the country.
We'll back up to Mother Nature.
Mother Nature is by then I'm on the road as doing crew and front of house mixing, and Steve Norkey had a band that was called Mother Nature, and they had a deal with some publishers, and so I just remember going in with my guitar and overdubbing the guitar parts on these tunes. So later on, Dino, who was a friend of the band, this is in recent years, collected all the demos together, probably about 20 years ago now, and put it out under the name of Steep Eat Rojo. So it's a collection of demos and singles, and some of them I recorded. I worked in the 70s at a place called the Farmyard in Little Chalfont, which was owned by Trevor Morace. And Trevor Morace was originally the drummer with the Peddlers.
Yes.
And he was changing his music. He was later to work with Tina Turner and Howard Jones. But back then, they started a band called Quantum Jump. So I was in the Farmyard one day, and I heard a guy say, and we're off to the States and we can't find anybody to do it. And I didn't know what it was. So I just said, I'll do it. That's how I ended up working with DPD.
Oh, that's how. Okay. Well, with the compilation, was that Mother Nature, Orange Days and Purple Nights?
Yeah, Orange Days and Purple Nights was recorded at Trident Studios.
Okay.
And a funny story that Pete told me once was that as they were standing down in this big studio, the glass box up the top was a bit like Abbey Road.
Okay.
And he said, Pete said, so who's the guy on the organ? And they looked at him and they sort of, oh, that's the engineer. He was working the desk, but he looked like he was on the organ. and that studio had a great piano that was used on the Beatles thing, and probably on Let It Be. So when the Beatles moved out of Abbey Road for a couple of tracks, because they had an 8-track machine there, and EMI was still 4, it was quite a bright piano there, and that's what you hear.
Oh, was that back? Were they the engineers still wearing the white coats?
No, no, that was much more loose. Trident was in St Anne's Court in London, and it was about 4 stories high, and it was a good scent. It was a very modern studio back in the day, and they were much more loose. You're really thinking of a lot of the like the Decca sort of side of things, you would have had to be smart because Decca recorded classical music as well. You see,
yes.
No,
you had to be dressed for success. Yeah,
you did.
right. Yeah. Well, you didn't play on either one of the singles for Mother Nature, did you?
Yeah, I recorded and played on.
There was one in 71 and one in 72. Yeah.
Whereas it's called Electric Sheep.
Okay.
So I'm on Electric Sheep, and I'm on San Diego. I'm coming home, and quite a few of the. Yeah, I'm on a lot of tracks on there, but I don't think Dino knew who played on it, so I don't get the credit on there. Okay. That's cool. They're mates, you know. It was all right. There's lots of things out there that I've played on. I came across one the other day it's called Hornithology, where I played the funk guitar on. What's the song going? It's called Soul Serenade.
Oh, Soul Serenade, right.
And it's like it's a funk thing, a dance thing. So that was on Polydor, but they're quite obscure, you know. Nobody would know. And Bob Pierce and I, once we did the country stuff, we would go in and record road albums. So we'd be the rhythm section. I'd play guitar, he played drums, and we would record an album in a day.
Okay.
So we run through the rhythm tracks in the morning, and then in the afternoon I'd do the overdubs guitar, and then we were out the door. We didn't ever hear the vocals on them.
Okay. Soul Serenade, that was King Curtis, wasn't it?
Soul Serenade I copied was Willie Mitchell. He goes,
Willie Mitchell.
So crackly guitar.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
A great groove, you know.
Yeah, yes.
Willie Mitchell.
Yes, it was. He did it first. Well, how did you come to join Brewer's Droop?
Well, I was worked in the shop, and I saw the Droop formed it was a guy called Ron Watts who put the thing together. He was a local promoter, and I don't know what he was thinking about, but he decided to put a band together. And then after a few months, the bass player left, and they needed somebody quick. I don't know how long I was there, but probably 18 months. Okay. But during that time, we were playing something like 280 gigs a year. Okay. So we're out playing festivals, and we were on the college circuit. So by the time, you know, a year had gone by, you maybe have played the same college 2 or 3 times. And it was a bawdy bar band. You know, it was playing, allegedly, we played Cajun music. But fairly early on, we went down to Rockfield, which is a studio in Wales. And that was owned by Kingsley Ward. Yeah. But Dave Edmunds had success down there. Yes. And he'd recorded Fire Dance. Richard, what's the thing goes?
Yes. What is it called?
That thing. I'm not sure what it's called.
Sword. Is it Sword? It has Sword in it.
Oh, yeah.
What is the name? I'm gonna find out. I have to find out.
Saber Dance. It's called
Saber. It had yes. I was close.
Sword. Yeah, Sword Dance. Same thing.
Yes.
So he'd recorded that, and he was a producer. He'd already had the hit with "I Hear You Knocking," which is a Sparling Lewis track. Which, when you hear it again, you'll notice there are no drums on it.
Yes.
It's mouth drums. He's just going.
I have to go back and listen to that.
And he was into making things sound as though they were recorded in 1950. They were really good at it. And they were building the studio around us because a lot of the stuff was homemade. And it was starting to become cheaper for American bands to fly to England to record than it was to record in the States. So Kingsley it was a farm, and Kingsley made his farm cottages into residential. So working with Edmunds was great. He was really good at what he did. He was probably a bit disappointed in the band because we weren't as Cajun as he had hoped.
Okay.
If you've ever listened to The Promised Land, the version he does with the accordion on it, I think that's what he hoped it was going to be.
That's what he was going for.
Yeah. But we didn't. I mean, the guys were a road band. They liked the life, and they were drinkers. And the problem with it was we were never off the road really to learn much new. So the recording was done in between gigs. We would do it 3 or 4 days, then we'd have to go out to work again. And we were on RCA, so that was it was an interesting time. We had an A&R guy called Alan Sizer, who was he was a mover and shaker, but he wasn't terribly musical. He wasn't. You hear me say that a lot of times. There's not everybody gets in the right job, So he made a few moves later on that I didn't really agree with. But the Droop there was an Irish drummer who was a lovely, lovely guy called Bobby Walker, and he didn't like recording. And he got this part-time job that when he was off the road, which wasn't very often, he could go and do some painting at the local hospital and painted the walls.
Okay.
So he said, "I'll tell you what, if you don't mind, I'm going to go and do the painting, and you can get Pick with us to play the drums."
Yeah. Okay.
So that's how I met Pick.
That's how Pick got. Okay. Well,
he was the session drummer. He lived at Rockfield and waited for bands that needed a drummer.
I wanted to mention that the Booz Brothers album, released in '89, but these were earlier recordings, circa '73 and '74, right?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. RCA paid for the recordings, and then they stuck in the vaults for a long time because Knopfler was on them. They decided to remix them.
Okay.
Missing out RCA and missing out. I mean, the guys were. There was Watts, Darrington, and Mackay were the centre of the Droop, and they claimed all the royalty on it.
Okay.
So there's another story of I call him John. Where's the money, Mackay? We never got paid. Or I didn't get paid. They did. So when the album was released again, I called up the record company to see, what my artist cut was, and I got the call back. Don't hassle the record company, because what they were doing was the same with the Peanut Rubble thing. You got hold of a recording and then you lease it.
Yeah.
You lease it out. So all the Droop stuff you see, the Booz Brothers, is leased.
Okay.
What they didn't know was that once you lease it, then the leasee can take tracks off that and put them out themselves.
Right. Now see, and the whole album cover is almost a direct copy of Brothers in Arms.
Yeah, it's a steal.
Dire Straits, yeah.
So
except the end of the guitar is kind of drooping a little bit, but so it was all geared towards Mark and Pick. It was all geared towards Dire Straits.
It was done. It was riding on the back of. It's not a very good album.
Yeah.
The guys couldn't seem to come up with. I mean, I was the bass player in the band.
Yeah. And
although I played on the single, which was released on RCA, I played mandolin and guitar and bass, but they hadn't recognized. I'm early 20s, so I'm 22 or something. And I haven't got much sway with these older guys to do anything, except for life on the road, which was quite extreme. I tell you a story of being stuck in the middle of Germany.
Okay.
Which is this has come to mind since you asked me to do this. So that we're in Germany. We're in a transit van. All the gears in the back, all the back line, and the PA. and all the guys travel, 6 of us with a roadie. So we're in pretty close quarters all of the time. The singer was under an order of GBH. I don't know if you know what that is.
What is that? I've seen that. What does that stand for?
It stands for grievous bodily harm.
Oh, okay. There was a band. There was a German band named that too, GBH. Yeah.
So I felt kind of safe because if he tried anything with anybody, he was going inside. So we're in Germany, and the engine blows up on the Ford Transit. Well, we've got a book with us, which is an AA book, which is yellow. It's always in the van. And if you're in England, you dial up, you had to go to a phone box, of course, and you call the AA and they come and sort you out.
Okay.
Well, we're in Germany. So we open the book and it says, call Basingstoke. Well, Basingstoke's in England.
Yeah.
So okay, what are we going to do? We haven't got the money to pay for this because we haven't done the work yet. And so we're in a hotel. We've probably done a couple of gigs actually thinking about it. We're in this hotel, and I was sharing a room with Bob Walker, and Bob put his hands behind his head and he laid on his bed, and he said, "Dale, this is fantastic." I said, "What do you mean? We've got no vehicle. We can't go do the gigs, and the only way you can stay there is if you stay in the same hotel. You haven't got to pay the bill till you leave. You see."
Okay.
So we're going to be there for days, and so Bob says, he's Irish. I'm having a great time. I haven't got to work tonight. I've got a comfy bed. I'm warm. He was telling me all the good things,
the good positives,
and that kind of stuck with me really, because that in learning the ropes, it's learning when to lay back and enjoy what's going on around you.
Right.
It might turn into a story that I can tell you one day, which is this. So.
Well, good. I'm glad you say that. Yeah, it's like what could you do at that point? You might as well just kind of enjoy it. Yeah.
Well, so he would remind me of of how to cope. God rest him. Now, mostly the Droop are dead now. There's only me left, and another guy.
Well,
so largely they've died out.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask you about that Booze Brothers the album. Were you able to? Was Mark Knopfler able to kind of showcase his guitar finesse at that time?
Well, I'd left when Mark finished the album, so I didn't actually get involved in those. But he was allegedly writing those songs at the time. But when the single came out, I saw that I was missed off the label by the main characters as a writer, and I thought, I don't have a future here. So I handed in my notice, and that's when I got the deal with Antic Records, the Onkin Smog thing. And that was kind of sour grapes, because the mainstays of the band wouldn't sign to even say I've been in the band.
Really?
It was not skin off their nose to do that. So when the RCA album was re-released, it was all a bit dodgy, really. That RCA, I don't know if you know this, but if you remix the original multi-track, you then have a different version. But that generally, morally, whoever pays for the recording owns the recording. So I was, at the time that came along, by then I was a TV composer, and I looked at endless contracts, and I was being called into the mechanical copyright protection department to advise them on other things. And I didn't feel it was correct for me to be part of something that they officially did not own.
Right. No, I wouldn't either. No.
So I, every time I got my fingers burned, I kind of stood back and let the people go up in flames, really, if they were going to.
Yeah.
I think the Droop album you speak of sold because it was on vinyl and cassette and all sorts of other things, probably on CD now. It sold, probably a couple of 100,000, and the money went somewhere. But I'm not chasing it. I'm quite happy with my life.
Yeah. It's not. It's really not worth it. Yeah, it's not. Yeah. Well, let's talk some about playing some of the artists that you played with. Uh, Stories of playing alongside George Harrison.
Well, George is really a brief time when, towards the end of the 90s, I was working with Legs Larry Smith, and we were doing a cover of Oh, it takes a jump and shout, the cats meow, the dogs bow wow, everybody makes a rap down on Jollity Farm. So it was a remake of Jollity Farm, which was written by Neil Innes. So I was working with Neil Innes, who was a good laugh, good. We did tracks like there was one called Isle of Money. And of course, when you said it quick, it was I Love Money.
Isle of Money. That's right.
These things were double meanings. And I was playing pedal steel on these tracks.
Yes.
So, and George played the mandolin, ukulele rather. He was a ukulele freak. He can't stop playing guitar, and he always had a ukulele with him.
Yes.
He owned, George Formby was a guy that was in the films over here. I don't know if you know the name. And he played ukulele. Yes. George had seen him when he was very young on the movies. And George owned some of those actual ukuleles used in the film. He'd say, "See the mark there? That's where he threw it in the wheelbarrow on the film."
Speaking of, I wanted to mention the little play on words, a little word games. There was a band, American band, that recorded on Apple, the Apple label. I guess this is late 60s or whenever. And they were called Brute Force. Have you ever heard of that band, Brute Force?
No, that's a new one.
I think it was just like a one-off. And anyway, the song was called The King of Pho, F-U-H, The King of Pho. You get where I'm going? Okay. And so when they would sing in the song, they would say, another way to describe him instead of the King of Pho is the Pho. Yeah.
Which reminds me of an album that was called, again, as it was a Gus Dudgeon album called King Brilliant.
Yeah.
So
King Brilliant.
That was I think you've interviewed one of the guys that used to play with him. I'm just trying to think of his name. It'll come to me in a moment. Okay. So King Brilliant, and also Pick Withers played with him.
Oh, okay.
And I bumped into Pick at the Charlie Dore gig.
Yeah.
And this was kind of interesting. That this is back to the Dire Straits thing. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, we've just had some stuff put out on the radio by Charlie Gillett, and there's lots of response from it." I said, "Well, what's it like?" He said, "Well, it's a cross between Bob Dylan and J.J. Cale. It's called Dire Straits." So I said, "I wish you the best of luck with it," And within a few weeks, Sultans of Swing was the demo, and of course, all the record companies wanted to sign them, even though it was the punk days.
Yeah,
they signed that band.
That's
so when we first met Knopfler, we were doing a Brewer's Droop gig at Leeds Uni, and he was the support act. He was playing a National Steel, like I've got one on the wall here, a silver, like the one on the cover of the Droop album. He was playing ragtime with his friend, and they were the support. You would never have known they were going to be anything other than an ethnic sort of duo. But the Harrison meeting was, I've worked with quite a few well-known people, but with Harrison it was slightly different, because if we went down the pub, then the eyes would bore into him all the time. You got the feeling everybody wanted a piece of George, and he wasn't that kind of a star. He was fairly self-contained, but he'd obviously, as probably all the Beatles, had got used to the fact that it never goes away. There's always somebody. But he was quite a gentle guy, and he was still into music. But things by the end of the 90s, he explained that I'm so sad of being alone. What's his name? Singer died.
Oh, Tom Petty?
No, not Tim.
No,
This is before Tom's still alive.
no, not Tom Petty died.
Yeah, Tom
Tom
Petty.
Petty.
Yeah, but he was live at the time.
Oh, he was alive at the time.
Even telling you the story.
Yeah.
Why can't I think of that? I always play the tune and I get it.
That'll get
Roy Orbison.
Oh, Roy Orbison. Yeah, the other one in the band. Yeah.
So Roy, he's just said they couldn't do that sort of stuff anymore, and that really he was looking after his son, who was around about 18 at the time, and that his interests were elsewhere. The Wilburys had come and gone, and he wasn't to know that he was towards the end of his life at that point. So I played on a few tracks. He played on the stuff as well, and then he was kind of gone. That's happened a number of times. The Van Morrison things, I was really just the engineer recording or editing together 100 songs that he'd come up with that were just demos. And my job was really to remind him that he'd sometimes use one bit of a song in another one, so he couldn't use it again. And I remember he had a pad with the lyrics on, tiny writing in green ink, and he would dip into these lyrics and then go somewhere to kind of sing them and then arrive back again after the event, so he was definitely in the ethos somewhere when he was working. And I think that was possible. That's what's on offer with a lot of artists, like say Joe Cocker. They disappear, and they come back. It's almost like they don't know where they are. Julia my wife went to see Van playing in Oxford just a few days ago, and he was walking around the stage, sort of directing the band. But I know full well that he would book some really good players, and they wouldn't know what the hell was going on. The band. He would change the band to change the music that he played. Which is why he's gone through so many different styles. He used the Chieftains at one time. He used Jerry Lee Lewis's sister to do an album. So they're quite diverse. But I'm talking about just trying to remember the name of the album. They were about, for the next 2 or 3 albums, these songs would leach out onto the albums. But most people think that when you write an album, you, like the Beatles, would write a whole album's worth of material, but that really what's happening is you write all the time and you record, and when you've got enough, you put an album out.
Without an album, yes.
It's only a concept album when it's Sgt. Pepper, but I wouldn't even think that was a concept until it was strung together in that order and given that name.
Yes. And why so many of the first albums are the best albums. And then the second album, that sophomore, the sophomore slump they talk about, is not as good because depending on the record label, you only have a shorter period of time to come up with tracks. Before the first album, you had forever, or whatever, So, yeah.
Well, if you've been after this fame and fortune for a few years, you put all your best tracks into the record.
Yeah.
And you don't have any more best tracks. But with the Beatles, they had 2 writers that could just write at that time at an alarming speed.
Yeah.
And they understood the format of music.
Yeah.
I think probably because they were fairly well schooled. They'd broken songs down. They knew how songs were assembled. And then, of course, Paul McCartney stayed in London with Jane Asher, whereas the others moved out. So he was still available to pick up all the vibes going on that managed to keep them on top. But today they played an Oasis track, and that really Oasis was a kind of continuation of the Beatles 25 years later. And all that was, I was asked to write some TV music with like them, so I'd researched what they did. And what I came up with was the fact that it had a very distorted guitar, strummed. So the Beatles could have gone that way. They could have had an amp turned out, if I turn that out flat out and get a fuzzy sound, that would have seen the Beatles through another couple of albums. but they didn't really have a soloist. Of course, George would tell me, he said, I'm useless, I'm a terrible guitar player. And I would fly to his defense, saying that it was iconic. But
yeah. Well, he was. I have to say, he was my favorite Beatle. He was.
yeah,
I think it was unfortunate that he was like relegated to like one song per album. You know, I don't think that was fair. That was quite fair. Yeah.
but then there was I'm not sure if it was fair or not, but you got the alarming amount that the other two would write, and I think he was probably getting better and better in the background, but the machine was in at full tilt. Ringo was on a Parkinson interview one day, and they said, "Why didn't you write more?" He said, "Well, these guys would come in and say, what have you got, Ringo?" And I'd sing some ditty, and then they go, "Yesterday."
Yeah, I know.
and if you saw the Let It Be film, I don't know if you saw that on Netflix.
Yeah.
It shows that it shows that they really understood what they were doing, and they were able to, as all these bands, they have an idea, they work on it together, the chemistry comes together, and then suddenly, it's a song that you really, really know.
Right.
I could play you 200 ideas that are as good as that, right. but we never heard of them.
yeah. Well, I think George proved, with his solo material after the Beatles, what a great songwriter he was, and how valuable he was to the Beatles, I wish it had just been more, what's the word for it? Where everyone was included in the songwriting, process. Yeah. But it wasn't.
Well, on the stuff I do, if the band are there when we make the music, then right. You'll see that they're involved in the writing.
Yeah.
Because if they're not, if you've got the whole concept and they play on it, that's a different thing. But if they're there, they put in their 10%.
Yes,
it's worth inviting them to be part of the publishing.
Yeah.
But of course, the way the Beatles ran it in a nutshell was they learned on the job. They got better on the job. The money came in from the records. I said to you, it was a tiny amount about an hour ago. It was a tiny amount. When their manager died, they formed Apple. All of a sudden, the floodgates were open because EMI now distributed the album. Yes. But their percentage was probably gone from 0.25% to say 20%.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't need to sell so many albums to be wealthy, because there'd been a lull between when they stopped touring. So as soon as they stopped touring on the old record deal, their income would have gone like this.
Right. It would have. Yes.
So, but of course, the two writers, their income would have been maybe even raising, as things were used for different. So again, you've got this problem within the band. You've got two people that aren't earning anywhere near as much, and can't afford to keep up with the other two.
Yeah,
there's an imbalance. Whereas a band like Coldplay, I believe the writer splits it between everybody. Yeah. So then when they come off the road, if they ever do, they're on equal share. So they're a happy band, it's the right way to do it.
It's the right way. Well, you want to talk about some of the artists that you've gigged with too. Of course, Russ Ballard, see my interview from August of last year. Rod Argent, those two, and then Kiki D, which you mentioned earlier.
We're playing with Russ. It's been over a period of, I suppose, 30 years. But the majority of gigs I would play would be pubs and clubs. And we knew quite a lot of musicians. One of I enjoyed playing with was a guy called Bobby Graham.
Oh, okay.
Bobby Graham was a session drummer. And so we had a little band. We'd play on a Sunday night in a pub. But Bobby Graham had been on all sorts of things. He'd been on Tom Jones hits, Dusty Springfield. He was the drummer on the Dave Clark 5. He was the drummer on the Kinks, You Really Got Me. And when we played those, I had a trio with Bobby Graham and Jim Rodford. when we played those songs, Jim was in the Kinks for like 25 years.
Yeah.
So if we played You Really Got Me, I got the rhythm section from the Kinks giving me.
Yeah.
And it was always a shock just how good it was and how easy it was to play those tunes.
Yes.
And I would sometimes say, that's just like the record. And then he'd say, yeah. Bob would say, oh, yeah, I played on that.
Yeah.
And there's a recording of me playing a set with those guys, and Rod's on it, and quite a few other people. John Verity's on it, Big Jim Sullivan. Yeah. And when we were running through Baby Please Don't Go, on the sound check, Jim said, and it was Bobby Graham said, was that you or Jimmy Page you played on Baby Please Don't Go? And Jim said it was me. So I'm standing there playing the song to the guy that played it on the original record.
Yes.
You get funny feelings sometimes.
Yeah, right. Now, Rod, did he have a stroke recently?
I haven't spoken to Rod. I wrote to him the other day, and I will be talking to him. He had to come off the road. Things weren't working out health-wise.
Yeah.
He got a brand new house and studio a few years ago that he hadn't spent much time in. The Zombies have been touring in North America regularly. They got an American management. And the gigs they were doing weren't the 60s gigs. Yeah. These were gigs in their own right because they were still making albums. So I think they honored as many of the gigs as they could, but it was an indicator that Rod should stop playing. Okay. Colin's still out there. Yeah. He did the boat trip just recently, and the other members of the Zombies, the bass player went on to guitar, and Steve Rodford is playing the drums. So they're still playing some of the tunes. They're still out there, but Rod's songwriting now. He's on leave.
Yeah. Now Kiki D. The only thing I knew from her up until recently was the duet with Elton John, Don't Go Breaking My Heart. But then I found a very compilation of her early material. Really good stuff. Really good.
Yeah, Kiki was a child star. She'd been in the movies, when she was very young. And she got on Rocket Records as Elton was climbing. So she was very much on the back burner, and she did the first album, Loving and Free, which had great musicians on it. And when I took on the job to work with her, we then did a little tour of America for sort of 6 weeks tour. But she was recording again at this was the Marquee. She was at the Marquee Studios, and they recorded I've Got the Music in Me.
Yes.
It took them 120 takes to get the backtrack.
Did it?
And Joe Partridge took me in the office and said, "Look, we spent all that time. We've done this," and he threw the single down.
Oh.
And so I played. It was an acetate, so I played it, and I said, "This is if you don't know the Trogs, this is a number one."
Oh yes, I know that. I'm familiar with it.
Do you know the Trogs?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes.
Okay, well, this is a number one. And I meant it, because I could spot that it really had something to it. And it was written by the keyboard player. So the band was sent on holiday, and suddenly we got the biggest show, which was Top of the Pops. Right. And the band couldn't get back in time. So I played keyboards on the Top of the Pops session. And Stuart Epps played my precision bass. Okay. And Roger Pope, who wasn't on the recording, his bass drum was, because they borrowed it, played the drums. Oh. So when Keith looked around, it wasn't her band at all.
It wasn't.
Doing Top of the Pops. And which caused a lot of problems for me, because when I would show up places, I'd get recognized as being, oh, you're the guy. And it's actually, no, I'm the guy sorting the gear out.
Yes, you should have said, "Yeah, I've been with her forever." Yeah,
because they're going to show you to a dressing room, and you don't want
they would.
Technical department.
Yeah. Well, a couple others I wanted to hear about now. Wanda Jackson. Now, is that the country and western singer?
Oh yeah, Wanda came over and we did an English tour with her. This is more recently, and I took the place of Jack White because Jack White had done an album with her. So I had to try and emulate what Jack had done, which was quite avant-garde, really. But if you look online, you'll see there's one. My favourite one is we played in Bristol Harbour in a boat, which was a club called the Thelka. So if you look at the Thelka, Bristol, Wanda Jackson, you'll see Graham Walker, who did the Gary Moore stuff, and Guinness, who's John Gordon on the bass, and Simon, keyboard player, used to be a conductor, for Cats and that kind of thing. And we're the backing band, and we did Jersey. We did it about 10 dates. At Jersey, we were on before Van Morrison, and we were playing to a few thousand, and one of those marquees that's got the open sides.
Yeah.
And so I decided I'd like to go and say hi to Van, but he closes down the stage from the caravans right the way through, so I couldn't get near. Security wouldn't let me near, and I got all areas pass. So I was with the owner of Proper Records, a bass player, Paul. Paul said, "Well, there's a friend of mine this guy's just died, actually. He was a road manager from The Clash. So I'm going to go and say hi to him. Do you want to come along?" And it was a comedian it's a poet. He does poetry. John Cooper Clarke is the name.
Cooper Clarke, yeah.
So we went and had 15 minutes with him instead of Van. Yeah. But I remember that particularly because I was interested in John Cooper Clarke, and he was just exactly the same to us as when he's on stage. I just thought everything he said was funny, and he probably did as well because it was.
Yes.
So that gig was quite memorable one.
He was what they classified as a punk poet. Yeah.
He's a punk. He is to this day. Yeah. So that was a memorable thing. Wanda lost her voice, but she still worked. So the thing you see on Bristol.
Yeah.
So I'll give you example of. So if she's doing rockabilly, all the old rockabillys were played in E. So you go. So you got that's in E. Well, she dropped the keys as time had gone on. So I decided to take a guitar along, tune down, because if you're going to play that in a dropped key, that's the lowest key you can play on a guitar. If you're going to play it lower, you go.
So high. Okay.
Instead of down there. So I took this guitar along. It's up on the wall there, still tuned down to D, and but then of course I had to play some of the other tunes like "Baby Please Don't Go" in like F sharp, which is a bit of a killer. But I was trying to cut down on guitars, so I take the one guitar with me. Anyway, the first show, she says, "Okay, my voice is a bit croaky, so I'm going to drop it down to C." So I ended up with this tuned down guitar, and I had to play really high again. I hadn't at all. So, but you'd never know before you went on with what key she was going to do stuff.
Okay.
But she was very experienced at working a crowd.
Okay.
And it was a really enjoyable job. I loved that.
Yeah. One more I want to hear about, and then let's fast forward to the Lunar Blues.
Yeah, sure.
Album. One more I want to hear about, Albert Lee. Now, know who I always get confused with Albert Lee?
Alvin.
Yeah. Alvin, yes.
There's a story there, which when he did, the Country Boy album, that the record company, this is the story he told us. He said, when you deliver, they said, "Oh, what's this country shit?" So he said, "Well, that's what I do." So he said, "We were expecting a little bit more bluesy." he said they thought I was Alvin Lee.
Oh, they
signed Alvin. So, but fortunately, the song was covered by many people. I played in a band called 7 Year Itch, and again, this is now we're up to about 1980, and I'm the bass player, and we're a club band. We're a pub rock band, I suppose, but their interest was country. So we had an old friend of Albert's was a guy called Keith Nelson, who was a banjo player, and he and Albert were interested in speed picking. Their ambition was to see how they could push the limits. So we would start songs. We go, really be fast and faster than that. Badly
like Flat and Scruggs, yeah.
Lightning stuff. So Albert at the time was working with Eric Clapton. That would have been his regular gig. All the people around him were slowly being fired because that's another guy that changes the band to change the music, and he was the only one left. So I think Eric was going through a bit of a time, and if you listen to Just One Night, it's around that time. There's an album called Just One Night, and you'll hear playing with Albert was quite extraordinary. Even being on the bass, playing a 1/5 type bass, I had to really keep my wits about me, because if I strayed and listened to him, I might lose my concentration as to where I was supposed to be in the song. Yeah. And he would get himself into a corner, and then, well, the interesting part was how he got out of trouble on the fretboard. It was always quite extraordinary, and the audiences would be ecstatic. So whilst he's playing a solo, they're clapping, and he's bowing to them as he's carrying.
As he's still working.
So I used to record these on my cassette machine, so I could listen to them when I got back home. So right. I've got a stack. So one of my projects is to transfer these old cassettes I've got on my transfer gear in the other room, and. But we would sit around playing, and we'd sit in a circle when we, not on a gig in Keith's house, and we perhaps sing a song each. And then he would. One time he asked me, he said, "Who do you like listening to?" Well, of course, I didn't realize that he knew all the guitar players. So I'd say, "I really like Cornell Dupree," and he'd go, "Oh, Cornell," and then he would. This is the extraordinary bit. It's the same with Andy Powell, the Wishbone Ash guy, that they then play just like the player that you're talking about. Just like it, every nuance. And so Albert's job in Eric's band was to sound like Eric when Eric was a bit out of it.
Oh, is that right? Oh, how unique.
And for that, he would get one solo a night in Country Boy, to show off his dexterity. Yeah. Albert used to play in. We bump into him. He played in an English country band called Country Fever.
Okay.
So they'd be zooming up and down the motorway. It wasn't until he left England, went to the States, and started playing with Jackson Browne and becoming a session player, and then joining Emmylou Harris's band. So we're after that time. He's with Eric, and for a few years, every moment he had, he would come and play with us because it was free and it was fun. It's free music. But if he wasn't showing up, we would normally find there was an enormous audience to watch us, just in case he did. So I'm told that would be the same for Django Reinhardt. Reinhardt, if he didn't feel like playing, he wouldn't show. But the audience still would.
They would anyway.
Yeah. Just in case, I get that. I kind of get that. Yeah. There's not many players. We've lost Jeff Beck, who became my favorite go-to listening sort of player. Fortunately, I haven't heard all the albums, so I've got a bit of listening to do.
Yeah, and John Mayall not too long ago. Yeah.
John Mayall, yeah, we saw him. Is another friend of ours is Buddy Whittington, who's from your neck of the woods, and he played with John. But when John was booked over here, they didn't realize, this is the last tour he did, I must be 7 or 8 years ago now. They didn't realize that he just played with bass and drums. They weren't really ready for the fact he didn't have a star guitar player. So I think as Buddy was the support, Buddy Whitting was supporting him, Pete Stroud told me just recently that they got Buddy to join John to make it a guitar band, because that's really what he was known for over here.
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah. Okay, that's what he did.
I haven't mentioned Howard Jones, but I should mention that the Moondogs is Graham Walker and Eddie Masters and myself.
Yeah, yes.
Joined by Richard Cottle.
Okay.
If you look on I've just started a website. It's not complete yet, but if you look on Derik Timms, spelled DerikTimms.com, I've got quite a few links on there with things that I've remembered. You can see where to listen to the Lunar Blues album. You can listen to it on Spotify in stereo, but it's actually recorded in Dolby Atmos, which is like immersive audio. And there's also a podcast which includes Richard Cottle, who's the keyboard player, and he's given a demonstration of how he plays on sessions and what he does. It might go over the heads of some people, but I found it kind of interesting, and so did Richie, because he's never heard himself recorded before speaking. We've got quite a lot of Moondogs back catalogue to put out. There's another one gone out called On the Fence, and I think probably the DerikTimms.com is the place to click on to find Peanut Rubble. You'll see the EP that's there with some unreleased stuff. We did carry on recording with Howard Tibble, who I haven't mentioned. Howard Tibble was the drummer with Shaking Stevens for years.
Yes, Shaking Stevens. Right.
But he's the drummer on the 3 Bar Fire stuff.
Yeah.
And we've written some things together. So also there's some library music there, which is you use that stuff when you're making films. There's also a portal to get onto Source Audio to listen to that. So let me know, click yourself and see what you...
Yes, well, yeah, we will. I did want to mention the songs that I've listened to off of the Lunar Blues, kind of for the audience too, and they'll pick their favorites as well. But I like the opening, Hear This, rocking opener. I like that one.
Yeah, hear this. We record lots of stuff. I've got one on here, which is a live track that I'm just working on. But when you're recording, something walks through the room, and it all turns out good.
Yeah.
And hear this, we're using modern technology to record, but we're still using drums, guitar, bass, and the terminology in there is all English Army terminology. That's what you're listening to. So every line refers to something in the British Army.
In the Army, okay.
And is there anything else you fancied on that?
Yes. Nice beefed up version of Eleanor Rigby.
Oh yeah, that's Eleanor Rigby. It's a rock version. Of Eleanor Rigby. It's kind of, it starts off with, you can't see it's out in shot, but there's a rhythm box up there, an old time rhythm box, and that does the first few bars, and then we slowly build it. You wouldn't know it was Eleanor Rigby till the...
No, I was going to say that. At the beginning of it, you wouldn't know. And then Jackie, nice blues and jazzy feel to that one. I like that.
That was recorded live, so there's I'll put that one up on YouTube. So there's a YouTube of us playing that.
Okay.
And that was, I got the set of lyrics. We did a run through and a take, and that was the take. So what you hear
was the take.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So there's a recording of that, but I've yet to put that up on YouTube. I'm glad you like some stuff.
And here's my favorite. Now I saved the best for last. My favorite on the album that I heard is She Like Zaz.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah. Really like the whole feel of that one. Yeah.
Well, that's recorded here. In here. So what I do is set the drums up in the other room.
Yeah.
And I record me, with a drummer.
Yeah.
And I've got a thing on here where I can take out my guide vocal because it strays onto the overhead mics.
Okay.
It's called spectral layers. So I put the drums through spectral layers, take out me singing, and then I come in here and I do the overdub. But that's sort of a bit of a nod to Little Feat.
All right. Well, again, Derik, thank you so much for doing this. It's been most enjoyable.
It's been a pleasure for me, Greg. Thank you very much for asking me. And please take out all the good bits.
Okay, all the good bits, right? Well, there won't be anything left.
That's good.
No, but I thank you so much, and I will get you a copy of this. Usually, a week or so, maybe a week and a couple of days, and then I'll post it on my channel as well. So
Okay.
We'll see what kind of mileage we can get out of it, and what kind of comments and views and everything. So again, thanks, and all the best to you. All right, keep in touch.
Till next time. Sun's gone now. Can you tell? The sun's gone.
It is. I was going to say it's getting a little darkening over there. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Bye for now. Thank you.